Shalom, everyone. If you remember, in the order of the 11 first melachot, which are for the preparation of bread and other foods of cooking and baking, we learned that TOKHEN, which means grinding of the wheat into the flour, that is the Av Melacha, the category of creative labor that is forbidden on Shabbat. And it doesn't matter if you're doing it with an actual utensil that is for that, like a grinder or a like we talked about last week, the um, now I forget the words in English. Eliu Machtesh for grinding spices. That is the Av Melacha of Tochen. But the next one, in terms of the order of preparation, would be to knead the dough. So we add water to the flour and then kneading. But amazingly, in between those two extremes, or two actual, for sure, halachic Torah biblical prohibition of Melacha of Tochen, there's also a in-between stage, which is for things that aren't necessarily wheat or other grain that we normally have to grind in order to make, but also vegetables, fruits, and even eggs and tuna. So that's what we'll try to cover today, and the connection between those two categories of creative labor. So the Rishonim disagree whether the prohibition of tochen applies to chopping vegetables finely for salad. Some maintain that since cutting the vegetables into small pieces serves a purpose, the prohibition applies. So we're not sure what the purpose is. Most Israeli salads are cut very, very small, and that way it mixes well in the falafel, or we're coming up to the Seder. I think that in the old days when they had soft matzah or lafa, and they would do the korech, they would take the Paschal lamb, a piece of it of the meat, and they would put the bitter herbs and maybe even other greens, and also maybe even hummus, because there was no prohibition of kitniyot at the time, and they would eat that, and that would be the perfect meal, but not the way we do it today with fast food, because the idea of Passover is hasava, and eating in slowness, and the idea of pretending to be kings and being free people. So, however, according to the majority of Rishonim, this is prohibited only if the vegetables are otherwise inedible, such as when one chops vegetables in order to cook them, potatoes, carrots, and whatever, then you have to cut them in order for it to be fully cooked. But in contrast, if the vegetables are edible raw, tomatoes, cucumbers, etc., there is no prohibition with chopping them. In practice, since this agreement concerns a Torah law, one should defer to the stringent opinion. Thus, one may not cut vegetables finely for a salad. And what I was told in Yeshiva was that the simplest shinui is that Shabbat, the cutting of the vegetables should be just larger pieces than normally during the week, because that is a proper shinui. Um, and thus, one may not cut vegetables finely for a salad. However, if the salad is being prepared right before the meal, even the stringent opinion permits it. It's an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda and the Gemara. In this case, the cutting is not derech melacha, but derech achila, the way that we eat, as one may eat finely cut food on Shabbat. Lechatchila, it is preferable, even when preparing salad for the upcoming meal, not to cut the pieces especially finely. And so, like I said, most people who didn't grow up in Israel aren't even aware of this kind of way of calling it Salat Israeli. Actually, I found a beautiful website of Chabad, of their Cheder, and they call it Salat Kol Tuv Shel Hashem, the salad of all the goodness of Hashem. And this is for ages fourth to sixth grade, and they're talking about how to prepare different salads on Shabbat, and they actually start with a recipe and how to do it, and then the idea of mixing before or mixing after the liquid, and all different shinuim that we're going to learn now. So one mash foods like bananas and avocados, and we're not talking for a baby, because for a baby obviously that's allowed, because otherwise they might, God forbid, choke. And we're talking about for adults. Some are stringent and forbid doing so with a fork, including for immediate consumption. Even the stringent opinion permits mashing these foods with a spoon, because that is considered a shinui. However, the lenient position allows mashing bananas and avocados even with a fork for immediate consumption, and the halacha follows this position. So the rationale behind it is that grinding wheat and stuff like that, it can never ever be eaten as dry. There are people who eat raw wheat before it becomes hard and dry, but with other vegetables and fruits, it's already called a tolada, and the banana and the avocado are both edible even without the mashing. Um, Thus, one may mash a banana or avocado with a fork for immediate consumption. As we have already seen, the prohibition of TOKHEN is not relevant to food being prepared for immediate consumption, as long as the mashing is not done with a special utensil designed for this purpose. So let's learn the next line and then we'll go to a few actual visual explanations. One may use a meat knife to cut a roast into slices, even for later consumption, because that is not tochen by any definition. It is just cutting, and you're allowed to cut on Shabbat. We're not talking about cutting skins for making shoes or something like that, but just regular slices. So, in terms of mashing eggs, which aren't a vegetable or a fruit or a grain, as far as I know, this utensil, the masher, a potato masher or egg masher, that is definitely not allowed on Shabbat because that is the kli that is specifically for that purpose. Rabbi Melamed will suggest a egg slicer. Um, like this, and then you can you can reposition it, lengthwise and otherwise, or with a hand one, which is much simpler. I just couldn't find a picture of it. The one that you hold with your hand, to do the cutting. And last but not least, another kind of is this one. So these spaces are very wide apart, and yes, it is for mashing potatoes and maybe even eggs. But when I next talk to Rav Melamed, I will ask him specifically about this because it somehow is in between the two examples that he gives. So therefore, um, similarly, one may mash hard-boiled eggs with a fork, even when it is permissible to cut something or crumble it. Sorry, yeah. One may not do so with a utensil that is designed for this purpose, like a grater. However, one may use a utensil that is designed for cutting things into large pieces, and that's why I said that about that larger masher. I'm not sure what Rav Melamed's opinion is about that, but I will ask. And therefore, one may use a cheese knife or an egg slicer since its blades are far apart from one another. Similarly, one may slice a loaf of bread as well, and it doesn't matter if it's for immediate consumption or not, because again, that's not called grinding. Also, if I remember correctly, the Shulchan Aruch talks about the fact that there's no tochen achar tochen. So if you made bread and you ground the wheat before that, or somebody else did it, and now you want to break the bread apart to put in your soup or to dip in sauce or something like that, that is permissible. That's not considered tochen because we don't have a double tochen, just like we don't have bishul achar bishul, that cooking after something is fully cooked. So just to remind us of that, and I think that's why the next halacha that we'll learn tomorrow, halacha gimel, is about lash, kneading specifically with dough, but again, examples of things that aren't food or dough, like cement and other things like that. And so we'll stop here and we'll open up for questions.